So I guess we're going to go over test A. And let's start with number 1. Now, what I recommended before the test was for you to factor without looking at the multiple choice answers, right? Just factor. So let's ignore these guys for a while. Let's just... And of course, you're always supposed to try to pull out the GCF first. So when you look at these 3 terms, you have 8, 12, and 32. What's the number in common? What's the number in common right there, guys? 4. By the way, if you want 5% extra credit, all you have to do is follow along and correct it. So if you do pull out a 4, is there anything else to pull out? Is there anything else in common in all 3 terms? B squared. There's a B here, a B there, a B there. You want to pull out the maximum amount of B's. So if there's 4 here, 2 here, and 5 here, you can't pull out 4 from all of them. You could pull out 4 from this one, but not this one. You can't pull out 4 from that one. I mean, you could pull out 4 from that one. So you want to think of the maximum amount of B's you could pull out from all 3 terms, right? From all 3 B's, which would be a B squared. So 4B squared is your GCF. So if you do pull out a 4B squared from the first term, 4B squared times what will get you an 8AB to the 4th. Well, that would be 2AB squared. There you go. Okay. And then when you say 4B squared times what gets you a 12AB squared. 4 times what is 12? 3. And you need an A. And you don't need any more B's because you already have a B squared. Finally, 4B squared times what will get you a negative 32B to the 5th. Well, 4 times negative 8 is negative 32. And you need a total of B to the 5th. So B to the squared times B to the 3rd, that'd be B to the 5th. And that's your answer. And when we take a look at the possible answers, you don't see it there, right? So the answer is none of the above. Now, this is version A. Version B is different. We'll get to that later. So if you have version B, you could just follow along right here on version A and try to understand it better. But we'll do version B later. If not in this class, you'll have access to it later on the internet. Okay, so number 2. Let's ignore the answers for a bit. And that is really easy to do because the A value is 1. When the A value is 1, you can put the variable there and the variable there. And you think, what times what is negative 28 that if you combine together is negative 3? Now, if you're struggling with this, think of the multiples of negative 28. So it's always what times what is the C value that if you combine together is a B value. So if you go negative 1 times 28, negative 2 times 14, negative 3 times does not work, negative 4 times 7. So when we think about all those possibilities, negative 4 plus 7 is positive 3, but we want a negative 3 up there. So we need to change the signs. Make it a positive 4, make it a negative 7. So positive 4 and negative 7, that's your answer. And when you check your answers, it is positive 4 and negative 7. So this is option B. Let's move on to number 3. Once again, forget about your answers for a bit, and let's lay it out. What times what is 24 that if you add together is negative 11? 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Which pair of numbers gives you a negative 11? 3 and 8, if you add those together, it gives you a positive 11. So you want a negative 11. So all you have to do is change those signs to a negative 3 and a negative 8. Negative 3, negative 8. Check for your answer. Is it there? Is it there? Some people see these numbers, write this answer, and it's wrong, right? So the correct answer is none of the above. Prime means that you cannot do it, and we know we could do it. We just have the answer there, but the answer just happens to not be there. Now again, different versions of the test are different, so don't think that this is the same thing as version B. Let's move on to number 4. So again, on number 4, let's ignore the multiple choice answers, and let's recognize that this is an even number and that's an even number. So we could definitely pull out a GCF. What's in common in both terms? If I were to pull out what I can, what could I pull out? I could pull out a 2, but more importantly, I could pull out a 4. If I pull out a 4, what would be left on the inside? 4p squared minus what? 9. Yeah. Now, if you look at the inside of the parentheses, see, if you look at the inside of the parentheses, you got to see if you could keep going. So on the inside, I do have a 4p squared and a 9. Both of these guys are perfect square terms. This is a perfect square term. This is a perfect square term. So we learn how to factor perfect square binomials by square rooting them and placing them into our answer format. So let me rewrite this. I'm going to have a 4 out in the front, but then I'm going to take the square roots of those guys and put it into this answer format. So what is the square root of 4p squared? The square root of 4p squared? 2p. And what is the square root of 9? 3. So we have a 2p and a 3, 2p and a 3. Now, if we know it's a binomial, and we look at this last term, it's a negative 9. The only way to get a negative 9 is to have a negative 3 times a positive 3. The signs have to be different. Not only that, if I were to start distributing to check my answer, I need one to be negative and one to be positive so that when I combine like terms, the middle terms cancel out to get a perfect square binomial. If they were the same sign, the middle term would not cancel out and I'd end up with a trinomial. Let's move on to number 5. Always start with the GCF. The GCF is 3RT, so if I do pull out a 3, an R, and a T all at the same time from both terms, what would I have left on the first term? 3 times what is 6? 2. R times what is R squared? R times R is R squared. And the T is already there, it's only 1 T, so that's all I need for my first term. For my second term, 3 times what is negative 3? Negative 1. And then R times what is R? We don't have to worry about it. And then T times what is T squared? T. So there's my answer. Looks like an F, sorry. So that's 3RT. There's 3RT. 2R minus 1T. 2R minus T. So the correct answer is D. Let's move on. Number 6. Let's set it up. What times what is negative 24 that if you combine together is negative 10? A lot of people get confused. Make a list. Negative 1 times 24. Negative 2 times 12. Negative 3 times 8. Negative 4 times 6. Those are all the possible ways of getting negative 24. Which pair of numbers combines together to give me a 10? Now, if we combine negative 4 and 6, if we were to combine them, wouldn't we get a positive 2? And we need to get a negative 10. Okay, now negative 4 times negative 6 would give us a positive 24, and we're talking about negative 24. Okay, so I've already listed all the blue possibilities here besides changing signs. So what I recommend is go through on each one, combine them together. What is negative 1 and 24? That's 23. Is the B value 23? No, so this did not work. What's negative 2 and 12? That is 10, isn't it? However, we want it to be a negative 10, so I need to change the signs on both of them. So that's going to be a positive 2 and a negative 12. Positive 2, negative 12. That is my factored form. If I check my answers, positive 2 and negative 12, it's not there. So it's not prime. Prime would mean that you can't do it. Right here, it's none of the above for number 6 on version A. Once again, you have version B, it might not be that same answer. It might be something totally different. Let's move on to number 7. Number 7 asks you to do factoring by grouping. So let's first make 2 groups. Separate the first 2 from the second 2. I see a lot of people just put parentheses right here. Don't do that. That'll mess you up. Actually, rewrite the whole thing. Rewrite the whole thing and leave some space between the 2 terms, between the first group and the second group. And then factor out what you can from the first group. So on the first group, I could pull out a B. If I do pull out a B, I'll have a B minus 2 left over. Let me do that in blue. Bless you, by the way.
Thank you.
And then on the other one, I could pull out a 3, a positive 3 that is. And then I would also have a b minus 2 left over, which means that I have a b minus 2 in the first group, a b minus 2 in the second group. I could take those binomials and pull them out, factor them out, and place them in the front. B minus 2 out in the front. And what would be left over? The b right here and the plus 3, both of these guys are left over, so b plus 3 is inside the parentheses. And that would be your answer. Let's move on. Number 8. What do you notice about this quadratic trinomial? Is there something in common to pull out in all three terms? No. No, there isn't. So what do you notice about this trinomial? Is there anything special about this? Don't we have a perfect square term in the front and a perfect square term in the back? Yes. So can't or shouldn't we attempt to take the square roots of those guys and then plug them into this answer format? Yes. So what is the square root of 9n squared? 3n. What is the square root of 25? 5. So you put a 3n there and a 5 right there. Now the question is, you see how this last term, the c value, is negative 25? I need this to be what? Positive, positive, negative, negative, or different signs? In order for you to get a negative 25. Here, let me actually plug, just give me a guess. Plus, plus, minus, minus, or plus, minus? Plus, minus? Okay. Now check out what happens. 3n times 3n, that's 9n squared. Oh, plus, minus, I'm sorry. Let's change that to a minus. Okay, so then 3n times negative 5, that would be a negative 15n. But then positive 5 times 3n, that's positive 15n. Positive 5 times negative 5, that's negative 25. What happens to those middle terms? What happens to those middle terms, Vanessa? They cancel out. So if they cancel out, notice that the above is a trinomial. It did not cancel out. You have a middle term there, right? So the plus minus cannot be correct. But that is the only way I'll end up with a negative 25 over here. Okay? So what do we say about this since it doesn't work? This did not work. And it doesn't matter if you switch up the signs. Like if you put 3n plus 5 times 3n plus 5, that will not give you a negative 25 at the end. That'll not give you a negative 30 in the middle, right? Even if you were to go 3n minus 5 and 3n minus 5, at the very end, when you go negative 5 times negative 5, that will not get you a negative 25. That'll get you a positive 25. So what's happening here? What am I realizing here? What am I realizing here? None of the above? No. It's prime. You cannot factor it. So this one's prime. Number 9, the last one on multiple choice. Right here, the a value is 6. What must I do? Go through the steps. Step 1, a times c. That's 6 times negative 3. That is negative 18. So negative 18 is the number we get from step 1. Step 2, make a list. Think of the multiples of negative 18 that combine together to give you the middle value, positive 7. So negative 1 times 18, negative 2 times 9, negative 3 times 6. It's all the possible ways of getting negative 18. Which pair of numbers combines together to give you a positive 7? Negative 2 and 9. That'll give you a positive 7. Now moving on to step 3. Step 3 is a little interesting. You write your answer format. And what do we place in this first part of the binomial and this first part of the binomial? What do we place right there? Anybody remember? You put this value right here without the square. It's your AX term, which in this case is 6m without the square. So 6m belongs right there. 6m and 6m. And what belongs in these blank spots right here? the two numbers from step 2, the negative 2 and the positive 9. So let's put the negative 2 and the positive 9 in there. Now, if you're thinking that you're done factoring, it can't be right because 6m times 6m is 36m squared, not 6m squared. So this is why it's important that we do step 4, which is reducing. It's supposed to be in your head. I like showing the division right here. Actually, not dividing by 4, I'm sorry. Dividing by 2. Right? So let's divide by 2 and divide by 3 over here. So 3m minus 1 and 2m plus 3. Now that is your factored form. If you had some extra time on this test, you could have distributed and see that you do get that same answer above. I'm going to stop this video and I'll explain the multiple choice on version B on the next video. And we'll continue with the rest of this test on future videos.